But it's your platform. So why don't you welcome everybody and then we'll get going.
Hi, this is Rabbi Shais Taub broadcasting live from the Soul Word Studios in Five Towns, Long Island. And I welcome all of you, as well as our very special co-host, not a guest, but a co-host, Rabbi Nechemia Schusterman, a dear friend and a partner in a real labor of love, passion project, as they call it, called Four Cups Haggadah. Rabbi Schusterman, take it away.
All right. So thank you for having me, Rabbi Taub, Rabbi Shais. We're going to toggle between all the different names. And thanks for all those who are here, both on the Zoom and on YouTube, and are part of this book launch. I think this is the first book launch ceremony I've ever been a part of in my life. Quite possibly my last, unless somehow you and I find some passion project to get into again. So I think the way this was marketed is, how did this come to be? And this book launch. So I'll give a little bit of a background to some of the events that led to where we are today. And that is, if you told me that I would know anything or have anything to do with anything in the world of recovery, Jewish recovery or otherwise, a couple of years ago, I would have just looked at you with a blank face, not because it's unimportant, just because I just knew little to nothing about it. I had read the book, God of Our Understanding, so I knew about it. It was a good book to me.
Everybody's read God of Our Understanding.
And anyone who hasn't really should.
Thank you.
And this is not even a plug for that book. There's a plug for a different book, but the reason is because God of Our Understanding has such a wide range. It is so relevant and so pertinent, even to those who are not in the classic clinical sense in recovery, because on some level we all are in recovery, and there's a lot of incredible spirituality in the world of recovery that I've gotten to learn a lot more about in the last little bit, but by no means would I say I'm an expert. So there's a lot of lingo in the world of recovery. So here's going to be my first lingo drop for the night, and feel free to correct me because I'm by no means an expert. So
by the way, Nechemia, not to cut you off, but when you say lingo, I don't want to break your flow. By the way,
so we break my flow.
We never we never did a live thing. Well, actually, I shouldn't say we never did a live thing before. We did. You and I, you were a guest for about 5 minutes on my Soul Words fundraising campaign.
Yeah, but that was a side note. You got big things going on then.
So I'm going to learn your style right now. I don't know if it's good to cut you off or not, but you say lingo. I want to tell you something very interesting regarding lingo. There's an English expression for insiders lingo, and it's called a shibboleth. Shibboleth or shibboleth. I'm not sure how to pronounce it actually. Probably shibboleth. Shiboleth. It's actually a biblical word. The word shibboleth.
Shibboleth.
Right. It's from Nach.
Right.
That there was a civil war between the tribes of Israel. Right, so they had different pronunciations, different
and that's tribes. How they have to tell the two sides apart.
So how do you know if he looks so Jewish, right? How do you know if he's so they would tell them pronounce the word shibboleth. And if they pronounced it like with their tribal accent, then you would be able to know which tribe they were from. So in English, the word is shibboleth or shibboleth. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but the word is shibboleth. But this is what I want to tell you. Dr. Bob, the co-founder of AA, said there are no shibboleths. I'm not sure how to pronounce the plural. I can't pronounce the singular, let alone the plural. But he said there are no shibboleths in AA. In other words, he didn't want there to be a barrier that if you don't know the lingo, you can't be part of recovery. So at any rate, Dr. Bob didn't want there to be lingo, at least not in a way that makes anyone feel that they're not a part of. So.
Okay. You didn't ruin my flow though I because I know myself, I do jot notes just to remember my flow because I forget. But we'll get to Dr. Bob in a second.
And by the way, as rabbis, another side point, I think that we do this all the time, and we have to really remind ourselves not to use Jewish inside language that makes people who maybe don't have such a robust Jewish education feel feel like outsiders. So at any rate, so what we'll endeavor to spell out all the inside lingo, both recovery and Jewish and otherwise.
All right. And on that note,
yes.
The first lingo drop on the night, if that's
lingo drop.
Thing, the lingo drop will be my qualifier. That's more of an Al-Anon.
Oh, that's really, you sound like a real experienced recovery guy.
Only a teeny bit. But that's in Al-Anon. That's almost how they open. Everyone begins their little thing. So my son is my qualifier, which means for those who are not familiar, why do I have even any right to say anything about anything? And the answer is that my direct connection to the world of recovery is I have a son who is in recovery, recovered. I know that itself is a whole debate, but we'll leave that for a larger conversation on the topic, because once we go there, we're not coming back, and we are on an agenda tonight. So, by
the way, if Nechemia knows how to do anything, it's how to keep me to a schedule.
Well, you can get to that part of it later. It's funny because I can't keep
which is the only way this book exists.
Well, I can't keep myself to that schedule, but apparently I'm good at doing it for others.
You know how to manage. Yeah, that's right.
All right.
You do belong in Al-Anon.
All right. So, Baruch Hashem, a couple years ago, I knew nothing of this. I had read a little bit. And then a little over a year ago, what had been going on for a long time prior, which was my oldest son, who is Kanai Nahar, doing a lot better today. The situation reached an epic proportion. He was involved in drugs and alcohol, and the situation became unmanageable to the point that he reached out for help. And Baruch Hashem, that set a journey in motion for him, and I'm being very conscious to not talk too much about him and his specific journey. He's pretty open about his story, so if you like to follow him, his handle on Instagram is Schusterpeckle. So he's got that little Schuster humor as well. But he's the reason this is all happening. But the point is back up, let's say, a little over a year ago, a little more than a year ago, life as my family knew it kind of turned upside down as my son went through this incredibly strong challenge. Everyone knows that recovery is a disease that affects the whole family, or addiction affects the whole family. There's the addict, there's the parents, the siblings, and all their friends, and it doesn't just stay in one spot. And life as we knew it then changed. And it's interesting because I have a little bit of perspective, a little bit of rear view mirror to look at, and we're all much, much better people for it. Like, it's really changed us all for the good. But there are challenges that go along with it. And at the time that all of this came about, let's rewind back in time till let's say roughly last year Pesach time. My son who had been in the hospital, and he had gone to a recovery program, which was a disaster. And I know that you've spoken about that in some of your other workshops that I participated in. And then he finally was at another recovery center, which was significantly better. And it was now Pesach time, and he was finishing that recovery center during Pesach time. And from there, the plan was for him to go to a sober living home, and it was Pesach, and because of COVID, our Chabad house was not able to host. So we were able to go to a brother of mine in Atlanta for Pesach. And during that time, there was so much going on, and there was so much uncertainty, so much unknown going on in our life. While thankfully my son was on his own journey in the right direction, heading to good places, and we were figuring things out as we went along. But he was unhappy and miserable. We were unhappy and miserable. And we had a lot of questions and very few answers. Now, in the time leading up to that, from the beginning of the crisis until that point, my wife and I had both, worked on starting to get ourselves educated on the ideas of recovery. I had read the big book, Alcoholics Anonymous, which again, just like God of Our Understanding should be mandatory reading, that should be mandatory reading for everybody, whether or not you are directly affected by any addiction of any sort. And we joined Al-Anon meetings, and we read the 12 and 12 steps and 12 traditions. And so I had like a loose knowledge of the information, because again, you have to be careful. I'm a rabbi, but there is something biblical about the big book of AA. It's not a book of Bible. It's not canonized. It's not Jewish. I know you have a whole backstory to that, from Carl Jung getting his information from, I think it was the Maggid, right?
Yeah.
The Maggid of Mezrich. So there's definitely some Jewish influence over there, but there's, like the Torah in this way, I think it's safe to say that there's layers and layers and layers. The big book also has incredible layers, and you can't just read it. It's not a novel. You need to study it and then study it again and again and again. And you can interrupt my flow if you want to chime in with something over there.
You're doing great.
I see that look on your face. Anyway, so the point is that so Pesach was here. Pesach is for those who are familiar with those who are religious and observant. You're not supposed to be doing too much work. And I was out of town, so I had a lot of extra time to do a lot of studying. And I was studying different talks of the Rebbe, from Sichos, Maimarim, some of the more mystical discourses, and then
Pesach related.
Pardon me? Oh yeah, all Pesach related stuff. And the one thing that just kept on popping into my mind is that everything I am studying is stuff I've been dealing with. I saw flavorings of that in AA, in the book, or in the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions. Just in general, the whole idea of exodus from a place of Egypt, which was total, despair, to redemption. Just the themes kept on popping up more and more and more. And I said to myself, there's gotta be like a Haggadah that the Haggadah has, instead of having the commentary of whoever. There must be thousands and thousands of different kinds of Haggadahs out there, but there must be a Haggadah that's a recovery Haggadah. So I Googled it, and I saw that there were a couple of, PDF copies available online, grainy copies of things not particular. Rabbi Tursky did have a Haggadah, but maybe you could help us understand the distinction between his and the Haggadah that you and I helped put together. But let me just finish that flow, and then maybe you can address that. And so I jotted a few notes for myself, and I said, you know what, maybe I'll do it. Maybe I'll be the guy who will help put that Haggadah together. This was before I reached out to you. Another influence, another piece that was very influential in the whole conversation was I had been at a bar mitzvah in Atlanta just a few weeks before Pesach for my nephew, and he quoted that line in his bar mitzvah speech. It's funny, people don't think that anyone's listening to the bar mitzvah speech. I was listening. So my nephew quoted, I think it's from Jonathan Sachs, the answer to why is what. And I'm sure his speech was written by his father, but I was sitting in a huge bowl of why. Like, why is this happening? Why me? Why my family? What's going on? Why am I? Why? What's going on? And I had so many whys in my head, and there was no answer. And it turns out there really still is no answer, unless the answer maybe is what. And what am I going to do about it? And I said, maybe helping to put this Haggadah together would be the what to the why is this happening? Why am I suddenly touched by addiction and recovery, a world that I knew virtually nothing about? And so that led me to you. So I was at my brother's, and I said, I said to my brother, I said, this, we have to make this. This has to happen. So he says, I think your first step is to call Rabbi Shais Taub. He is the foremost expert on Jewish recovery certainly in the Orthodox world. I'd venture more than that, but
I object to that description. I really have to object, but I don't. Yeah, I'm very uncomfortable with that. I don't think it's true. But okay, Elio, your brother said to call me. That's fine. Right. You could always call me.
Your job is to be humble, and then my job is to call balls and strikes as I see them. Okay, in any event, regardless. So I called you, and you responded very enthusiastically. You were very excited. You said, "Oh, I want to do this. Yes. I want to. I've been wanting to do a recovery Haggadah for years." You said, you told me, in fact, and you were proven true because GoDaddy doesn't lie. You said, I even bought a domain because I know the title of the book that I haven't yet put together. That's right. So and the name of the book is The Four Cups. The name of this Haggadah. That's okay, and that's gonna be my first time doing this right here. That's the name of Four Cups, FOUR Cups, CUPS.org. And I just put it. Oh, I put it in the private chat. Let me put it in the public chat. The fourcups.org is, by the way.
And I'll add it to the YouTube chat as well.
The fourcups.org, that's where you can buy a copy, see some sneak peek pages of the inside, buy in bulk. and you save. I feel like the infomercial already. But the point is that you told me that you're very excited about it. You want to be involved in it. But like every rabbi, you said, I don't have time. There's no way I can do this. This is a gargantuan project. It's going to take a ton of time. And I just don't have the time to do this. And me being me I said, okay, well, that shouldn't stop us just because I don't have the time, so he doesn't have time. We're gonna have to find a way to make it happen. So I said to you, how about, we spoke some technical stuff. I said, what about if you just send me a lot of WhatsApps, like bombard me with hundreds and hundreds of WhatsApps. I said, if I can get that transcribed, and then we can get that, edited and printed and laid out and all that other good stuff, we can make this happen. And this, by the way, this may be a first. I don't know if there's any other book on the planet that ultimately came into reality literally via WhatsApp. And in fact, that's what we did. We made a little WhatsApp chat. I think it's called Haggadah Shais or something like that. I don't remember exactly the name of our chat. And that's what happened. So we started and I said, let's spread it out over 6 months. You're like, if you want it ready for next Pesach, we need to be done in a month. And so really,
when you contacted me, it was the day after Pesach, 2 days. It was
either Isru Chag, the day after Pesach, or 2 days. It was right after Pesach.
And I said, if we want it ready for next Pesach, we got to do it now.
Right. So you clearly had a lot more experience because I've now learned about supply chains and China. So the truth is, all right. So this might be a good time for me to take a step aside for a second and throw out some thank yous, because not all the thank yous made it into the book. To the first edition, there'll be a second edition, please God, as we'll talk in a moment. So the transcriber. So this is how the process went. In the end, I was able to inject a few of my little suggestions, the ones that I jotted those notes at the beginning. But ultimately, you collected all the information and you verbally transcribed them to me or said them over in the WhatsApp.
I interject a little bit about the background before that.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, because before you even got the WhatsApps, there was a whole process of putting together the information, because I cannot claim authorship of this book. What I tried to do is put it into one cohesive voice so that it should sound consistent. But really, all these ideas are ideas that were shared with me by various Jews in recovery from various different fellowships at various different times. Maybe some of it's my own insight, but this is really a we project. This was written by committee, and yeah, I admit that I'm the one who put it together so it should flow and it should sound like one voice. But the ideas are from Jews in recovery from all over. And I want to add, I know you were mentioning about second editions, but I can't hold back. And I want to say that there will definitely, with Hashem's help, be a second edition, because the whole point here is we want more submissions. I was able to put together only that which I either already had heard or I was able quickly to put together from various contacts in recovery. But we invite more submissions so that we can have in the future, God willing, a second edition with more and more experience, strength, and hope from more people in recovery.
And let me tell people that same link, fourcups.org, where you can buy the book, you can also make submissions over there. You can email them, or there's actually a little web form on that webpage. You can make submissions there, and they'll be held in a secure bunker until Rabbi Shais Taub has a chance to look at them, review them, and if they pass muster, to be part of the next edition. So yes, well, let me ask you, was your intention that, when I say your intention, was your vision of what the finished product would look like, was your idea that it should mirror like the big book of AA, where there's no formal author of the book?
I mean, that's obviously my inspiration. That's where I got it from. The idea, everyone knows obviously that Bill W. was the one who was the final editor as far as the voice of the big book, but it was written by committee, and it's not his personal wisdom, and he never claimed it to be. And I thought that was a pretty good way of putting together a book that might help some people. Yeah.
No, listen, it's exciting and it's creative. and it just adds to the flavor of what the finished product looks like in having that kind of by committee style to it. I want to say some thank yous to some of the people who didn't think properly in the book. I'll do it briefly. I see that the sponsor, the named sponsor of the book, Harriet and David Moldau.
By the way, when you say sponsor in a recovery setting, you have to clarify.
You have to be careful. Let me.
Sponsors, sponsees.
I have to come up with a different word for it. The named
benefactor.
Benefactor, thank you. The named benefactor, whose name is on the front of the book, the Moldau family edition, Harriet and David Moldau, they're actually on the Zoom, I see their names, who really made this possible from a financial perspective, and there's a nice dedication from them in the beginning of the Haggadah. They're on the line, so obviously a thank you to them, but important thank yous are my sister-in-law, Denise Schusterman, who took those WhatsApp notes that you sent to me and typed them up. And in no particular, Shalom Lane, he's a quiet gem in the world of writing, incredible editor. He did an enormous amount of work. Yaakova Weber, who was a proofreader, I think she found like thousands of tiny little mistakes. These
want
were
to tell everybody how much serenity I think to pray for when we're finding thousands of typos.
Well, the good news is that I think it's Control H, where you can replace. A lot of them were like, inverted apostrophe. But I'll tell you this is, for people who don't know, Rabbi Taub is a stickler for details. He really wants things to be perfect. And inverted colon, can be a reason for a bad day. So you got to really, it's a compliment, but it also lets you know the level of perfection that was at least that you were striving for.
Perfection, Nechemia. Progress, not perfection.
I know. There you go. You're doing lingo drops left and right over here. Progress, not perfection. And don't worry, that there will certainly be a number of mistakes to keep everyone humble in this process.
We count on it. We're hoping for someone to find a real good typo, juicy one.
Exactly. And
what would be a recovery Haggadah without a juicy typo?
And an extra free copy to someone who gets like a really big boo-boo. I'm Arik Raskin, who was the religious researcher sourcing sources in Tanakh and teachings of different mystics and whatnot. I want
to just mention about Rabbi Raskin's work, something I'm very proud of, the fact that we have footnotes, because although the insights here are like folk wisdom from the rooms, but the Jewish sources are cited, and these are classic traditional rabbinic sources. So it is a beautiful mix of being very contemporary and from the people, from the wisdom of the rooms, but at the same time, it's really rooted in authentic tradition.
Yes, and that was something you insisted on, and actually, I think it's an incredible bonus to the book. And finally, Maishi Mucht, again, the Spotlight team, who we beat up on pretty hard, but there's no way this would have been able to have happened and come out in such a beautiful way that it did without their participation and real big efforts to make it work. They did an incredible job and put in endless hours in getting it done. But what I did learn now is, those things that you hear in the news about supply chains, those things are real. The book should have been on U.S. shores months ago. The good news is and also apparently from China to New York, you can go through the Suez Canal. You can go in. There's a lot of directions and ways you can go, but it's cool. You can follow the ship. The ship is scheduled to arrive in 3 days. So get those orders in. The 11th. Yeah, that's 3 days. So they pushed back 2 days, but that's after many other delays. It's Mercy Shem here, and you can order your books, and that's that. So that's a little bit of some of the background how all this happened. What I will say is Baruch Hashem at Schusterpeckle, the qualifier is Baruch Hashem doing better. I'm sure he's going to see this at some point. He's doing a lot better. He's doing his work, and you certainly can follow him and see how that journey has gone along. But that's not the focus of today's conversation. That's just a little bit how we got into all of this. So someone asked a question, and we kind of touched on that before. So maybe let's just address the elephant in the room. That was one of your jokes from your joke session the other night. Something about the elephant. Okay. And the point is that so how does this Haggadah, I'm not going to say different from all other Haggadahs, but how does it differ from the
How is
Haggadah
this Haggadah different from all other Haggadahs?
I know, right? There's too much of that going on.
Too easy, too corny? No, it's perfect.
No, it's appropriate. It's the flavor. But how is this different specifically from Dr. Twersky, who I know is he we can certainly say is, posthumously, but the leader in Jewish recovery. And the goal was for the book to have already been on store shelves by his first yard site, but it'll, Mercer Hashem, be out for the first Pesach after his yard site. How does this differ from the Haggadah that he put out?
First of all, From Bondage to Freedom, which is Rabbi Dr. Twersky Oliver Shalom's Haggadah, is enormous. It's fantastic. Without From Bondage to Freedom, this wouldn't exist. And I would say without the body of Rabbi Dr. Twersky's work, none of the things I've done in recovery would exist. He was the one who blazed the path and did it fearlessly, and did it when it was a lot less popular and a lot less accepted than it is now. So I won't say that. What I'll say is like this: he opened up the whole path and he made it all possible, and we're just humbly continuing in his path. That's how I'll say it. But definitely, From Bondage to Freedom is a classic.
Okay, and all right, I will, I'll know my place, and I won't say anymore. I'll say that is an incredible, as you said, that no one can challenge anything that Dr. Twersky wrote, said, because he's truly one of the greats. This book is, bigger, more colors and pictures, but there is something unique in the style, just the layout, the setup, the pull quotes from the big book.
It is more today because it is from today, and it's more at least aesthetically, like you mentioned, spotlight design. It's gorgeous. So like just from an aesthetic point of view, yes, it's very 2022, and it's just nice to look at. It's nice to hold. It's nice to smell. Yeah, like all the senses are engaged. And if you open up you rustle the pages, you can hear it. It's nice to listen to, and you can touch it. Yeah, all the five senses are engaged.
All right, so you're holding up the book. Maybe hold it to the camera just for 1 second longer. I think the question that pops out is the name of the Haggadah is the Four Cups. Yeah. Now, it's a recovery Haggadah. Yeah. And presumably, without doing a full in-depth dive into a lot, maybe we'll do a little bit of diving into some recovery conversation if you're okay with that. You would think that title seems to be contradictory to the mission of the Haggadah, which is to hold back from indulging in our addiction. For many, the addiction is alcohol, and if not the start, is certainly a part of the problem for many. So what's with that title?
Yeah, what's up with that, as they say. So first of all, like you mentioned, I had the title for this Haggadah long before I actually started writing it. And what, according to GoDaddy, when did I buy the URL? 4cups.org?
I don't remember offhand, but it was certainly 8-9 years prior.
It was like 8-9 years ago. Yeah. So I wanted to call it 4 Cups for 8 or 9 years. I'm just going to read from the introduction, a few paragraphs right here. This is a few paragraphs from the introduction that talk about the meaning of the title. The title of this Haggadah was chosen. Oh, this is on page 8. If you want to pull it up on the PDF.
You want me to share the screen and show this?
Yeah, it's on page 8. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Introduction. Go to the next page of the introduction. Yeah, and right there, the title. That's it. The title of this Haggadah was chosen in order to convey a subtle but powerful message. The role of the 4 cups in the Seder is well known. For those who cannot safely consume wine because of its alcoholic content, the question arises as to how one should view this tradition. Of course, on a very simple and practical level, we know that it is perfectly acceptable according to Jewish law to substitute grape juice for wine at the Seder. On a deeper level, however, we acknowledge that one who does not drink wine might wonder if it would be better to be completely distanced from the entire notion of drinking 4 cups, even if replaced with grape juice. Therefore, we feel that there is an important message in making it clear that the 4 cups not only have a place at a recovery Seder, but that they perhaps take on an even greater meaning in such a context. The 4 cups are meant to be cups of blessing, from which godly goodness flows. Although we may have replaced the physical contents of the cup with grape juice instead of wine, we do not forego the spiritual contents of the cups and the blessings that they provide us. To the contrary, we are even more cognizant of their power. For someone still struggling to escape the Egypt of active addiction, the image of 4 cups is one that provokes dread. However, for one who celebrates the miracle of today's freedom from bondage, the 4 cups have a very different meaning. They are cups of spiritual bounty, of wisdom, humility, and gratitude. We drink from these cups freely because their contents do not make false promises of escape. Rather, they fill us with ever-increasing levels of God consciousness and the awareness that the only reason we are no longer slaves to Pharaoh is that we are servants of God.
I'm going to stop the share, and before I say that again in your own words, because those are your words. But what I'm hearing you say basically is that, well, I think you answered the question on 2 levels. On one level, you're saying those who are drinking grape juice instead of something alcoholic because of their disease should not feel any less than. The cups of bounty still.
Right. That's on a very simple level. There's no less than here halachically. There's no question whatsoever. Yeah. That's on the most simple level.
But now on the deeper level, that I didn't want to mirror. I wanted you to say that.
Right. So on the deeper level, the idea is that the 4 cups, to someone who's still struggling in active addiction, that can be terrifying. The 4 cups, I'm going to have to be at a Seder and everybody's drinking and they're going to push it on me, or even if they don't push it on me, I'm going to see it, I'm going to be exposed to it, and all this dread that's associated with it. But what we have to realize is this: the 4 cups are cups of blessing, are cups of godliness. And one who is in recovery doesn't miss out on what those cups offer from a spiritual perspective. They don't have to forego it. They don't have to, to say, well, it would have been nice to have the 4 cups, but I can't partake in it. No, you should know that your 4 cups of grape juice have all of the spiritual benefit, and perhaps, not to compare, I won't compare one person to another person. I won't say more than other people, but I'll say certainly that the cups of recovery are infinitely more full of blessing than any of the false promises of the cups of active addiction. So we should know that the 4 cups is not something we have to hide from. We don't have to pretend it's not part of the Seder. No, I'll make a bold statement. The real 4 cups are the 4 cups of recovery. Whether there's grape juice or there's wine is not the point. If you can't safely consume wine, so there's grape juice. But that's not the point. And by the way, I should mention that there are plenty of people in recovery who are in different fellowships other than AA, or people who, alcohol is not their issue. They can safely consume the wine. And so to me, it's not about the physical contents of the cup. Those who cannot safely consume wine will drink grape juice. But the point is the spiritual content of the cups, that when you come to the Seder as someone who has a personal redemption experience, and you see these cups as an embodiment of, a tangible, a physical symbol of your personal journey, that can only be something to be celebrated. So, like so often people are like, oh, 4 cups. Oh, I'm in recovery. No. Recovery, the 4 cups belongs to recovery. I'm reclaiming the 4 cups.
Would it be incorrect to take that even a step further and say, on some level, what the average participant of a Seder is endeavoring to achieve via their Seder and the 4 cups that go along with it, the person who's in active recovery has already gotten there on some level. They may be shooting for more or higher or deeper, but on some level, they've already attained a certain level of freedom from that addiction that was making their life a mess.
Look, we all have our personal journey. And, it's interesting. The Jewish people, when they left Egypt, went on 42 jaunts in the wilderness, from captivity to entering the promised land. There 42 jaunts. So the Baal Shem Tov said that every one of us in our own personal life will go on 42 journeys. Like every one of us in microcosm lives that story. So, I have a line in the introduction to God of Our Understanding where I say, they say there's an old expression, the Jews are like everybody else, only more so.
Just more so.
So I said, perhaps we could say, that recovery is that addiction is like an exaggeration of the human condition. So the addicts are like everybody else, only more so.
It's more so.
Only more, maybe just a little bit with more exaggerated, a little bit more acute. So what I'm saying is, I don't want to say that, it's the recovery people who uniquely have an Exodus experience. But what I am saying is definitely, if you have somebody who has that experience, the recovery experience of Exodus at your Seder, you're going to see that this thing isn't a ritual. It's not a ceremony. It's real. It's the celebration of something that happened to me when God took me out of Egypt. Like we tell when the four sons ask, or the four children ask the question, the father says, God took me out of Egypt.
Reminds me of that story, which I think is real and is attributed to Rabbi Dr. Twersky about, why does he send people to meetings? Why not send them to a Tanya class?
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Right.
I'm going to let you finish that because you'll do it right.
I mean, people asked him, religious Jews who were in recovery, why didn't he send them to a Torah class that would, learn Musar, Chassidus? And he said, look, when they'll study with the life or death earnestness of the people in the rooms, then, I'll send people there to get their lives saved. But yeah. So
the addict, I know, again, we know it's controversial. Some addicts don't want to be called addicts forever. They want to be called recovered addicts. But when the person in recovery takes those 4 cups of grape juice, they are living their exodus. It's not a show. It's not an event. It's their experience. Okay, let's talk a few moments about some just general recovery ideas before we read a few of the selected texts that you chose, hopefully in advance. So the truth is, it does feel a little bit, maybe just because social media is out there, maybe because the world feels in a certain pre-messianic level of safety that people can share and talk about things that were really taboo once upon a time. I was listening to some recovery workshop today, from a bunch of Jewish people, and they were saying, like, back in the day, if a Jew, felt like they had alcoholism or addiction, they would say, no, just here, take some anti-anxiety pills and get some more sleep, which just turned them to a drinker and a drugger. So they just added to the problem. But it wasn't something that we could talk about. Now we can talk about it, which is a blessing, thank God. And we get to see the beauty and learn the lessons. And that's going back to what you said before about God of Understanding. I think people need to read that book, because even if you don't know much about recovery, the fundamental of what is addiction is that I'm numbing something that's hurting me. And whether that thing that's hurting me is a trauma that I've been through, or I just have a biochemical addiction or allergy to alcohol or drugs or whatever the particular substance is. The point is that I'm trying to fill that hole with something. So I finally found a solution, which is my drugs or my alcohol. And the real trick is to switch that unsafe numbing to a healthy, safe solving of the problem with the steps, et cetera, et cetera. But it does feel like it's happening more. And, it's always crossed socioeconomic, borders. It hit everybody. The rich people. Roland Hazard could afford to go to Carl Jung in London to be treated. That must be like what the really expensive recovery centers are today. Most people couldn't afford to get royal treatment for their issues. Right. But it does feel like it feels like it's more. Do you believe that that's the case? Why? What can we do about it? What's going on? Why does the world have such a big hole in its heart?
Right. Well, with this question, is there more addiction today than ever before? I don't know.
I don't know if I'm asking that. I don't know if I'm asking that. Is there more addiction?
Right.
Why does it seem like there's so much more hurt going on? People
more
are
pain.
hurting.
Yeah.
There's more pain. That's what it is.
Yeah. Well, look, the Jewish people specifically, let's just talk about the Jewish community. We have a luxury in this generation that we hadn't had throughout history. Most of Jewish history was about fleeing for our lives without any type of security, protection under the law. Threat of starvation was very real, violence. So, we have a sort of luxury today, which is to start focusing on things that, if somebody was an addict 150 years ago in the shtetl, with their Cossacks coming through, he didn't really have the luxury of dealing with that. It was about life and death. And so we have the opportunity now to start being honest about what hurts us and about the pain that we're in, and actually starting to do something about it. But there's another side of this, which is that, I don't know if there's more addiction today or more pain today or more trauma today than there ever was. I don't know, but I do know something. There's a lot more healing. There's a lot more recovery than ever before. And, let's just talk about recovery. Let's just talk about the spiritual model for addiction and recovery. That thing is 80 years old. Like if you were an alcoholic 100 years ago, you just roamed the streets like a raving lunatic until they locked you up, or until you die. And there was really nothing that could be done. So the whole idea that there's a choice is, this is very new. So I think it's a combination of the two things that I'm talking about here. One is we're not running for our lives, so we do have the opportunity now to do some of the healing that previous generations haven't gotten to do. And I definitely believe that when we do our healing, not only do we heal ourselves, but all our ancestry. I think that's very powerful. And then the other thing is there's just simply more healing available in the world today than ever. And, to me, it's pretty obvious that that's a foretaste of Mashiach, of the Messianic era, of the perfect peace and serenity that very soon, God willing, will be available for the entire world. So those in recovery are one segment of the population who's already tasting a little bit of the serenity of the complete Shabbos-like era, which will be a complete era of serenity, which is, like I said, God willing, going to be for everyone. Every single human being on this planet will experience it, and even the animals, because like the prophets say that the wolf will lie down with the lamb. So the whole world will be a place of serenity. But even before that happens, it's starting to become widely and increasingly more available. And this is one of the examples, I think. I think
it's such a beautiful thing what you just did. You tripped me up on my own words unintentionally and in the best of ways. I was focusing on why does it seem like there's a bigger problem these days? And one of the things that my wife, she's a positive psychology practitioner, is but what else is true? And yes, there might be a lot of hurt, more or less, we don't know. But what else is true is that there's a lot of healing and a lot of goodness going on that wasn't previously available. And that's just a general life lesson of there's always something positive to find in every scenario. Look for that lining because it's there. Okay, should we jump into the text, or should we talk a little bit about the Carl Jungian Maggid of Mezrich sourcing of AA, or do you want to not go there?
Whatever you want. I could do the short version.
Give the fast version of that, because I don't know. I think it's fascinating, and I cannot hear it enough times. I think because that'll give people appreciation of the Haggadah. A lot of the incredible wisdom of the Haggadah is sourced in AA. One would say, well, why are you sourcing in AA? AA is a Christian model. So let's debunk that.
First of all, I cannot do justice to the argument that I was able to make in God of Our Understanding, where I had dedicated hundreds of pages to slowly, systematically, methodically explain myself. So I would say like this: if you have any concerns about 12-step recovery being compatible with Jewish spirituality, I cannot do it justice off the cuff, but borrow somebody's copy of God of Our Understanding, and it's explained there. Okay, but the short version, since you want to know a little bit the history. When I wrote God of Our Understanding, one of the things I really wanted to do was to include a facsimile of the letter from Carl Jung to Bill W., which to me is one of the most important documents in the history of AA. And it was actually difficult at the time to even find it, to locate it. And there was a whole search that I had to do with the Jung estate in Switzerland. And then I found out that actually, because the letter was written in English, there was a different place where those letters were kept, which is at Princeton University, actually, interestingly enough. And Princeton University's library gave me permission to reprint the letter. But it's a letter where basically the story's like this. In before AA existed, before AA was even an idea, there was a guy named Roland Hazard, and he was a rich kid, a spoiled kid from New England, and his parents shipped him off for the best treatment money could buy. They sent him to Carl Jung, the psychiatrist in Zurich, Switzerland. So he goes to Jung. He's treated for a year. He's discharged, and he gets drunk before he's even on the boat back across the Atlantic. So he comes back to Jung, and he's like, "What's wrong with me?" And Jung tells him, "Well, I have theories about, people like you, alcoholics of your type, they really rarely recover. But I have a theory that in certain cases, there are seemingly spontaneous cases of recovery. And what they seem to all have in common is a vital spiritual awakening." That was the term that Jung used, a vital spiritual awakening. So if you'll have a vital spiritual experience, then maybe that'll save you. But I can't do it. I tried to induce it in you, but I can't do it. So best of luck. So he goes back to New York. He found a group of guys called the Oxford Group, who were practicing what they call first century Christianity. And I said to a friend of mine who's a Jesuit priest. So I said to him jokingly, I said, the Oxford Group, they went all the way back to first century Christianity. They should have gone back one more century. Then they would get to Judaism. But at any rate, so he was hanging out with the Oxford Group in New York, and he had a vital spiritual experience. Now, in order to keep your vital spiritual experience, you got to give it away. So the Oxford Group was telling him, you got to go find other drunks. So he found a guy named Ebby, or Edwin Thatcher, and he was a drunk, and he sort of carried the message to Ebby. And then Ebby got a vital spiritual experience. They said, you got to carry it to your friends. So he's like, the biggest boozer I know is Bill Wilson, who lives in Brooklyn on Clinton Street. And he went to Bill's house, and he told him he found God. And Bill said, I don't like that idea. He said, God of your understanding. I mean, he didn't use those words, but he said, it's your own concept of God. At any rate, so then Bill met Bob, and then they met AA number 3. And fast forward 3 decades later, and now AA has taken off. And one day at AA World Services headquarters in Manhattan, somebody, I don't know who it was like, Hey, you know how originally, our whole model comes from what Carl Jung told Roland, and Roland told Ebby, and Ebby told Bill, and Bill told Bob, and then Bill and Bob told the world. Did anyone ever tell Jung? And they were like, no, we should. I think we should tell him. So Bill Wilson wrote a letter to Carl Jung, and this is, by the way, there's a section in the big book that tells the story of Roland, and you could debate whether or not it's accurate. I mean, Bill Wilson is telling Roland's story, third hand, so you could debate whether it's accurate. But the thing is, Bill wrote to Carl Jung and told him, here's the story, here's how we represented the story. And Carl Jung verified it, said, yeah, that's exactly what happened. And not only did Carl Jung say that's exactly what happened, but he added some details. And that's what this letter is, the Carl Jung letter. So basically he writes back and he says, listen, it's 100% true what you're saying. Oh, beautiful.
So someone posted that in the chat. So there it is.
That's fantastic. So he says, yeah, it's totally true what you said. But I'm going to add some information that the patient, meaning Roland, didn't even know about. He says, I basically almost didn't tell him. He said, I was being misunderstood at that time all the time. People were like misunderstanding the whole spirituality thing. And so I was hesitant to even share that concept with him. But so you have to stop and you have to marvel at the hashgacha pratis, which means the divine providence here, because Carl Jung almost didn't tell Roland his theory about the vital spiritual experience. Like, he'd been harassed by people. By the way, the big break between Jung and Freud. Jung was the Talmud, the disciple of Freud, and they broke over whether or not spirituality is essential to human well-being. And I joke that Jung had the advantage of not being Jewish, but Freud, being Jewish, couldn't afford he couldn't afford to admit that we need God in order to be happy and well-adjusted. At any rate, so Jung almost didn't tell Roland his theory about spirituality, but he did. And then from there, that's how we have recovery as we know it today. But in this letter that Carl Jung writes to Bill Wilson, he says, I want to tell you something more. He said, the patient's craving for alcohol was a lower level manifestation of man's thirst for union with God. I can't read it because I'm old and I can't read small letters, but it's more or less those words. He says that the patient's craving for alcohol was a lower level manifestation of man's thirst for what's called in the medieval language union with God. In other words, Carl Jung said, you know what alcoholism is? It's you want oneness with God and you're mistreating it. You're misrecognizing the real underlying need. And that's why he says also that great turn of phrase in Latin. He says spiritus contra spiritum, which is sort of a pun in Latin, because spiritus means spirit, like spirituality, ruchnius, as we call it in our Ashkenazic accented Hebrew, and spirit also means like spirits, like wine and spirits, like the liquor store, alcohol. Right. So the appropriate antidote to the misuse of spirits of the alcoholic variety is to give the patient the spirituality that's actually what he's craving. So in other words, Carl Jung's whole concept was that addiction is not the problem, it's an attempt at a solution. The problem is the craving for union with God, which is being unsatisfied. And the alcoholic's trying his best to satisfy it through the numbing out, through the escape. union with God and being drunk are very similar in some ways. You definitely
forget about yourself.
You get away from yourself. That's right. You get away from yourself. Or I once heard a really great AA speaker, Earl H. He said, it's anti-me medication, right? I take this and I go away, right? So, but Carl Jung had the brilliance to understand that that's really someone wanting union with God. At any rate, and then he has that great line at the bottom in the footnote where he writes, he writes it in the King James English as the heart, H-A-R-T, panteth after the water brooks. That means a deer is panting thirstily by the water. So panteth my soul after thee, O God. Psalms 42:1. But we say, it's a Hasidic melody. At any rate, okay. So
I think it's brilliant just because, in a certain sense, it reframes and gives perspective that the addict is more aware of the fact that they're lacking connection with God, which is why they're searching.
Right.
It doesn't mean that you have to be an addict to search, but most of us just live our lives and we just go with whatever. We don't think too much.
That's right.
And the addict is maybe overthinking, but that overthinking, when you put a harness on it, takes you to the destination, and that's the most beautiful part of all of this.
Yeah,
we're starting to run over time over. All right, let's get to some texts.
Okay, so Nechemia, I couldn't choose which one of my babies over here. Each one of these was a baby. So what I decided to do actually,
go ahead,
is just to start at the beginning and do like the first maybe three. So
we say beginning.
Start from the beginning, meaning let's start from Bedikas Chometz, the search for Chometz on page 12, which actually happens the night before the Seder, happens before Passover. It has to happen before Passover because you're getting rid of the Chometz, so you have to get rid of the Chometz before Passover. Okay, so
on the screen we have page 12. Why don't you give us a quick tour of the page? Well, this is not the actual Haggadah Center.
Yeah. Okay. That's so you see here on the page you have the Hebrew up at the top here. Show them it's Bedikas Chometz if you're into that kind of thing, and then in English the search for Chometz. It tells you exactly where you're up to, and each stage of the Seder you'll see it very clearly marks what stage you're up to. Okay, and then it gives instructions. By the way, this is I should mention, this is a traditional Haggadah with the actual instructions. It's not only recovery insights. It's a real Haggadah.
I'm going to forward to some pages so people see that. You have actual guide over here. The matzahs are covered. They're uncovered. All the text is there. So this can 100% be used at your Seder.
Yes, that's the whole point. And I should also mention there was a difficult choice, but to make it Nusach Ashkenaz, which seemed to be the most popular request as far as which prayer rite to make it in. So it's not the Chabad version of the Haggadah. It's slightly different. It's Nusach Ashkenaz, which is at least it was more requested. So that's what we did, and maybe there'll be further printings. But it's a real functioning Haggadah with the actual Nusach, meaning the actual traditional text. We did not dare touch the text of the actual Haggadah, and the instructions are the actual instructions. We only added. We did not tamper at all with the traditional Haggadah text. Okay, so let's read this. Okay, so revealing our defects of character. That's what this little section is called. Revealing our defects of character. On the night before Passover, we are obligated to search for the Chometz in our homes. Traditionally, the search for Chometz is performed with a feather, a wooden spoon, and a candle. The following day, on the morning before the festival commences, we make a fire and burn the Chometz we have found, along with the feather, the spoon, and the candle. It is easy to understand why we burned the feather that was used to sweep the Chometz that was found, as well as why we burned the spoon into which the Chometz was swept. But why do we burn the candle After all, it did not come in contact with the chametz at all. You understand? You're going around the night before Pesach, you're hunting for the chametz, for the breadcrumbs and everything in your house. So you have this candle and you have a feather and a spoon. You use the feather to sweep the crumbs into the spoon. So the next day, when you burn the crumbs that you found, you burn all the equipment that you used for the search. Now I understand why you burn the spoon, because the chametz was swept into the spoon, and why you burn the feather, because the feather was used to sweep the chametz. We're trying to get rid of it. We're eradicating it. The chametz represents puffiness, ego. We don't want it. So, but what's with the candle? The candle didn't touch the crumbs. So why are we burning the candle? Why is that the minhag, the custom? One explanation is that the candle was needed to help us find the chametz. But after it serves its purpose, we must get rid of it as well, because it was involved in shedding light upon that which is undesirable. We used the light of the candle in order to reveal the chametz, which is the problem, the character defect, so to speak. There's a man who sponsors many alcoholics. Following the tradition that was handed down to him by his sponsor, he has his sponsees burn their written fourth step inventories after he takes their fifth step. He explained that the purpose of the inventory is to reveal the quote, exact nature of our wrongs. After it serves its purpose, we don't need to go back and look at it. We need to move forward and allow God to replace our character defects with the traits that he finds useful. And by the way, that's just something that somebody shared with me. Obviously, we're not telling you that this is now the official thing to burn your fourth step. This is what he did, and he found it meaningful, and he related it to this idea that you use the candle to find the chametz. So even though the candle didn't touch the chametz, but it was used to help you find it, to help you see it. So too, the fourth step inventory, what's it for? It's for finding chametz. It's for finding character defects. But once it did its job and it revealed those character defects so that we can surrender those character defects in the sixth step, at least according to that sponsor, he said, that's it. And actually, I asked him about that, and he said, look, we always have daily inventory. We don't stop with the inventory. We continue. We have a 10th step inventory. But the fourth step, he said, that was done. That unearthed all the garbage. We went back through our lives. Nothing counted, but to be thorough. And then we're done. It did its job. It's like the candle that was used for finding the chametz. We move it on.
I know a person in recovery who also their sponsors, told them to burn it. And I know how hard they worked on their fourth step. They spent weeks and weeks, but maybe even months. And I remember
some spend years writing.
My wrists are killing me, and I'm like, so why are you burning it? Like frame it, put it in a museum, go. But I guess that's the whole point, is that, in Yiddish, we're done with it. Don't dwell on the sin. Move on. And if you have to review again, then you'll come back and review the next time. But the new inventory will be a brand new one.
Yeah.
I guess we'll always make new mistakes.
Okay, let's go to page 16.
16.
Not every page has recovery insight on it. Oh, you skipped it. Go back up.
Especially in the beginning, it's just the lead up to the Haggadah.
Yeah. Okay. So here's the steps, and then right underneath. So show them the steps where it has the steps of the Haggadah. And
by the way, just since I've never done a book before, and this might be the last time I ever do, for people to appreciate how nuanced to have that little design on each one, this is painstaking work that an artist has to sit and do and figure it out. And Spotlight gets a lot of credit for doing a wonderful job on that.
Yeah, they did a gorgeous job. Yeah. And if anyone sees behind me the whole time, the Tanya map, which is behind me, which is a project I did 20 years ago. That was the first project I did with Spotlight Design. That's when I fell in love with their work. Okay, so let's look at the little recovery insight beneath the steps of the Seder. Good orderly direction. We begin the Seder by enumerating the precise steps that we will be taking in our journey to freedom, right? Like you just showed us, those steps. Kadesh, Orchatz, Karpas, Yachatz. Okay. We realize that in the past, many of us have resisted being confined by lists or by being given orders to follow. However, in sobriety, many of us have come to cherish the freedom that we gain through taking direction. Indeed, the word Seder itself literally means order in Hebrew. Is it ironic that a night that celebrates freedom is observed by following an order? We think not. Many of us have heard in the rooms that God, G-O-D, can be thought of as an acronym for good, orderly direction. Therefore, we are very happy to know that the system has been laid out for us and that the 15 steps of our liberation are set up clearly in advance. That was an insight somebody shared with me. Somebody told me that he used to get really restless at the Seder. He would get really restless. It was like this long instruction book and you got to go through it. Come on, let's fast forward. Let's jump to the end. And that after he came to recovery, he was like, he loved it. He loved how it structures it. And Seder means order, literally good, orderly direction, God. Yeah.
And it's the antidote to the chaos that led to it.
Yeah, that's right. It's the opposite of the chaos of active addiction. Absolutely. That's right. And that's freedom. That's right. Freedom. It's a paradox. Freedom doesn't mean want and abandon. Freedom actually means there's a structure and it's safe and things are reliable. Obviously, when we're relying on God and we're God conscious, then we relax because we know reality is a solid place to be. It's a safe place to be. And that's all part of that, direction and order.
Right. I mean, not to mix our conversations over, but something you speak a lot about on the parenting workshops is, kids want structure. They don't want you to order them around, but they want order in their life. They don't want to be told you can go to bed whenever you want. They want structure. No one functions in chaos.
That's right. That's right. And I should say again that Nechemia did an incredible job of creating good, orderly direction for this project and channeling some of my frenetic energy into orderly vessels. Okay, let's do the next one. The very next one, page 17. You see there Kadesh, which is the Kiddush. And it has the instructions there to make Kiddush and the actual words of the Kiddush. But on the bottom there, let's look at humbly letting go. Okay. Kadesh is the first step of our journey. It's the first of the Seder steps. This step is the recitation of the Kiddush blessings. Kiddush literally means sanctification. With these blessings, we proclaim this day, the anniversary of our liberation, as a holy day. In Jewish tradition, a holy day is observed as a day of Shabbos-like rest, during which we refrain from mundane activities and labors. Of course, this allows us more time to focus on spiritual affairs. But there's another message to be found here as well, meaning the fact that a holy day, in Jewish tradition, a holy day is a non-work day. It's a rest day. Why is a holy day a rest day? When we refrain from labor on a special day, we remind ourselves that our ability to accomplish things is limited. Many of us have heard the expression, don't just do something, sit there. Sometimes we have to humbly accept the limitations of our actions and realize that there's a difference between being busy and being productive. A festival is a day when the less busy we are, the more productive we actually become. It's just a simple idea in general about a Jewish holiday, not necessarily specific to Pesach. You can take that meditation every Friday night with you when you recite Kiddush or listen to Kiddush. You can think about when the day of rest comes in, it's like the most productive thing I can do right now is just let things be.
Right, but I think it's even deeper. So many people have a real issue that they need to address, and rather than actually talk about their problem or explore it, go to therapy for it, address the problem. Let me just take on another project. Let me numb it, not with a substance, but with an action. Let me take on a new activity. Let me take on new responsibility, just so that I don't have to think.
Yeah.
And that's not rest. That's actually that's
exhausting.
That's exhausting. Exactly. The opposite of it. Right. Do you want to go through the whole Haggadah and just spare people the need to buy it?
I don't mind to go through the whole Haggadah.
I was just thinking, by the way, we were talking before about the perfectionism.
Yeah.
Is this little purple line that I see over here?
No.
Is that in the hard copy?
No, it's not. I don't see it. In the hard copy, where's that page? What page is that?
18.
18. Let's see. No, page 18. I don't see any.
Perfect. Okay, so this is just on my screen. Okay, that's better.
Okay. Yeah. All right. All right. Let's do one more.
Okay. Any specific one, or just go in order?
No, just go in order. Let's go in order, because good orderly direction. Let's just go in order.
I love it. Okay.
And maybe we'll do a part 2 sometime.
Another lingo drop there. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Shibboleth.
Exactly. 21 at the bottom.
Okay. 21 at the bottom.
This is on Orchatz, washing the hands.
Right. The first washing of the hands. We mentioned that we wash our hands twice. Okay. So page 21, under the washing of the hands. We know only a little. And people who are big book thumpers will instantly recognize those words. Generally on Shabbos and festivals.
Shais, let me interrupt a second.
Yeah.
Are each one of the bolder black words direct pull quotes from the big book?
No.
Some are, some aren't.
Yeah. Some of them are phrases from the big book. Others are commonly heard recovery slogans. Some of them are neither. Just whatever fit, whatever was the right title, whatever seemed to be the descriptive title. Okay. Generally on Shabbos and festivals, Kiddush is followed with washing our hands and then beginning our meal. Tonight, however, we wash our hands, but we do not begin our meal. This is specifically intended to provoke the curiosity of the children so that they will ask why this night is different from all others. I'm sure, if you would ask, most people have been to a Seder. Tell me one thing that you remember from the Seder. They remember that why is this night different from all others? That the children have to ask, and very often it's we make a big to-do about it. The youngest child asking the Manishtano and asking, why is this night different? Okay. One of the lessons we learned in sobriety is we realize we know only a little. And you see there's a footnote there, and that'll indicate page 164 of the big book. And in the back of the Haggadah, there's the footnotes. Right? I guess they're not footnotes; they're endnotes. They're endnotes. Endnotes. Yeah.
That itself was a whole conversation.
Yeah. We labored over that one. Okay. So at any rate, we're saying that normally we wash our hands and then we make the blessing on the bread and we eat the bread. So why don't we do that on the night of Pesach? We wash our hands, but then we don't eat matzah. So what's up with that? So the answer is we do it to provoke the curiosity of the children so that the children will ask, why is this night different from all other nights? All right. So what's the recovery tie-in? One of the lessons we learned in sobriety is we realize we know only a little. It is okay for us not to understand things. It is okay for us to be confused. And it is okay for us to ask questions. This is not only for the literal child present at our Seder, but also for the child in each of us. Like, what's the message here? It's not just the children who are asking questions. I know the whole Seder is about getting the children to ask, but it's the inner child who's asking. And we have to be ready to ask. Asking is scary because when you ask for help, when you ask for information, you're admitting that you don't know. You're admitting that you can't do it on your own. And asking's a big deal. It can be very, very vulnerable to ask. But the night of our liberation is all about asking and saying, I don't know what's going on. I'm scared. I'm confused. Am I in the right place? What are we doing here? It's
Is that along the lines of in a Baishan Lamed? If you're too meek.
Pirkei Avos, the ethics says in a Baishan Lamed that somebody who's timid can't learn. That's right. So it takes courage. What's the opposite of being timid? It means being courageous. It takes courage to say, I don't know what's going on here. I didn't get life's missing instruction booklet. It seems everybody else did. I don't know how to live life. I don't know what's happening. I admit it. And it's okay to say that. Yeah.
Wouldn't it be great if life came with a manual? All right, let's do this only because, all right, folks, there's so much more there. I'm going to scroll them. It just gets better and better and better. There's so much incredible wisdom. Those who are familiar with recovery, there's such greatness in there, and those who are not familiar, you'll like God of Understanding. You'll learn a lot. I don't think this Haggadah is exclusive for those who know recovery. I think it'll be good for everybody. Rabbi Shais, I'm going to stop the readings for now. How about that? Are you good with that?
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. Well, the goal here. Scroll back in the comment section. If people get your copy, they're as soon as they arrive at the distributor, they'll be sent to you. Mitzvah Hashem on time for Pesach.
Where do they get the copies?
Right here. fourcups.org, www.forcups.org. In your chat over there. I'm gonna. You have time for one more, kind of big, easy for you, but a bigger question. It's on the general. It combine. I know these questions totally annoy you, but the regular people out there like me
Nechemia
are dying to know.
Worked with me for 6 months on this project, and he found out all the things that annoy me.
But what I did learn is the things that annoy you are some of the stuff that are most fascinating to everybody else. Maybe that's why they annoy you on some soul level. They're touching something deep. Your screen is not pinned. Pin your screen so that people can look at something more than just me.
I'm not spotlighted anymore?
Not spotlighted. Yeah, that's what I meant. Okay, so this next question that I have, kind of maybe this will be the closing question, unless you want to take some questions from the chat. This kind of puts a lot of the different conversations that you're having these days, whether it's parenting workshops to just education conversations, recovery conversations, a lot of different things that are, there's a lot of common denominators on a lot of the threads of things that you're teaching these days. And I guess the question that struck me is that I think, one of the big themes that you've gotten into these days is, something that I think kind of it's evolved. It went from unconditional acceptance to unconditional love, and now it's unconditional pride. It's like to recognize that, this is a little bit of a parenting kind of question, that because they are a child of God, how could I have anything other than absolute pride for my child? That's they're God's handiwork. So how could I have anything other than absolute, forget about accepting them flaws, who isn't flawed, and being loving them because they're my child, an extension of God, but I'm proud of them. That being said, I've spent quite a bit of time in the Al-Anon rooms, and a big element of that is boundaries and creating boundaries. I know that boundaries are not for the addict; they're for the family, for the person themselves to stay sane. And the idea of having boundaries is so that I can keep my life, my brain, my home, orderly, so that my life can stay manageable. So how do I have unconditional pride, but have boundaries in place so that I don't go crazy? And I don't want to make it personal about me. Just any person who has we're talking about the Seder. Let's say I have a child who's in active addiction, and I want to have a Seder that looks somewhat orderly. And this child is in active addiction. I don't want them at my Seder. It's horrible to even say those words, because the whole Seder is about bringing everybody to the Seder. Even the child who, the Rebbe would always talk about, bring someone who doesn't even know about the Seder and bring them to the Seder. But let's say I'm so concerned that it's easy to be unconditionally prideful when things are under control, when the person's in recovery. But when they're still in active addiction, and I want my Seder to be orderly, so I'm creating a boundary that you don't get to make this house crazy. How do I have unconditional pride and boundaries, and how do they work together? How was that for the longest question you ever got?
Yeah, and it's not the longest question I ever got. You're sorry, you don't win that title. You're asking about an apparent contradiction, which is, if I can phrase it in my own words, on one hand, we learn in recovery, and you mentioned the Fellowship of Al-Anon, that we need to have boundaries, and we don't want to be an enabler or a codependent. And at the same time, at least maybe nowadays, we hear a lot about dealing with children in crisis and being totally open to them and totally loving and accepting, which sounds like the opposite of the Al-Anon approach. It sounds like the opposite of boundaries. So that's the apparent contradiction. And I will admit to you that I grappled with that for a long time. I'm a slow thinker. I take a long time to process things. And precisely because of my background in recovery, I needed to really slowly process and figure out the whole acceptance thing. Like, no, maybe we need to just tell people, like you said, you can't be here. No, there's no place for you here. On the other hand, like you said, the Rebbe's mandate to us to bring in every Jew to the Seder. And should my child be any less than the stranger's child? I mean, you and I are both shluchim. I mean, we know what that means, that the stranger's child is the most honored guest at a Seder, somebody who wanders in and says, I didn't even know it was Passover till 5 minutes ago, right? We're thrilled to have them. So is my own child any less welcome at a Seder? But you're right, there's a lot to sort out there. So here's now we're starting the next hour of the Zoom over here.
I know your style. You say a joke, you say a story, and suddenly, poof, there's an answer. So just do your magic again.
Okay, let me back up a little bit and explain something that, you know what, I'm going to tell you something. Do you know what part of God of Our Understanding I would take out if I had to go to a second printing? Or it's gone to like 20 printings, but a second edition. I would take out the entire section about the Ben Seder Amida, about the stubborn and rebellious son. And I would take it out because it has hurt people. People have told me that it hurt them. And I am so glad it's there, because I would take it out and it shouldn't be taken out. It should be there. And I'm glad it's there. But if I came out with a second edition, I wouldn't have the guts to keep it there. In that chapter, it speaks, and I'm not going to reiterate the whole thing over there. You're going to have to borrow somebody's copy of God of Our Understanding. But it talks about the insanity of the parents, specifically of parents, not just friends and family, but specifically the insanity of the parents of the addict, and how their insanity actually exacerbates the whole drama and makes it the chaos that it is. And like I said, a lot of people have told me that they're deeply offended by it. And because of that, I don't have a heart to offend people. I would take it out. But every time I've gone back to it to look at it, I say to myself, you know what? When I wrote God of Our Understanding 10 years ago, I maybe knew 100 stories like that. 10 years later, I know 1,000 stories like that. So if it was true then, to me, it's only more true to me now, having seen it just play out over and over and over again. So there's no question like you mentioned at the beginning, Nechemia, about the family disease, right? It's not just that there's the qualifier and that's it, and he's the sick one. He's got to get better. No, we realize we all have to heal. And ideally, we realize that we all need spirituality for that healing. So let's talk a little bit about the insanity of codependence. What is that insanity? And also, why is spirituality the antidote to that insanity? So the disease of addiction is really easy. Well, I shouldn't say really easy, but it's easier than codependence to describe. We described it a half an hour ago. We said, with the Jung letter, that somebody's really looking for God, and instead they numb themselves and seek escape through their drug of choice, which may be a misnomer, drug of choice, but at any rate. So that's rather easy to describe. But what's a codependent's drug of choice? They're addicted. The addict. They're addicted to the addict. So just like the alcoholic gets drunk in order to feel that he's in control, which is a big misunderstanding, because regular people drink to lose control. Alcoholics drink to gain control, or a feeling of control, a feeling that the world is safe and okay. Right? Regular people, you have a few drinks and you feel buzzed and you let loose and you get uninhibited. But, those are amateurs. The professionals, why the professionals drinking? Because it's the only time I feel this world is a safe, predictable place. So, the alcoholic is drinking in order to feel a false sense of safety and control. The codependent is trying to control the addict or alcoholic because that's the way the codependent gains that momentary feeling of control and safety, even if it's totally false, even by begging and pleading and making all the ultimatums and making you sign contracts and all the scheming and the bargaining that codependents engage in, and trying to be sweet and trying to be tough and trying to win the debate and begging and all the different stuff that the codependents will try. But what's the real fixation? What's the obsession? The obsession is that if I can get this to work, then I'm safe. I can relax. Things are okay. Things are not chaotic. They're not spinning out of control. And what the codependent in recovery learns is that, my security and safety doesn't come from the behaviors of my qualifier. My safety and security comes from the fact that a loving God is orchestrating every moment of my life and every moment of my qualifier's life. And that God is not making mistakes. So that's why, spirituality is the antidote to the insanity of codependence, because the insanity of codependence is basically a false God of using the codependent behaviors as a way to fool myself into feeling like there's some control, which I don't really have. Okay. So we established that. Let's take it a little bit further. A lot of the attempts to feel the situation is under control are people-pleasing behaviors. You see this very, very commonly, that codependents are people-pleasers. And being a people-pleaser is a survival tactic for a codependent, because I can't rest. I can have no serenity until everybody is doing what they need to be doing. And maybe if I'll be sweet enough to them and I'll make them indebted enough to me, and I'll please them enough, finally they'll just stop being insane. Finally, they'll just stop endangering their life. Maybe they'll finally just be normal. So we learn to be people pleasers as like a desperate attempt to just get people to behave already, to get people to be normal. And if and that's why if you ask me to do something that violates my principles and my morals, I'm going to violate it if I'm a codependent in an active codependent addiction, because I can't afford to say no. If I say no, then you're going to go off and do something crazy, and then the world will explode.
And it's my fault.
And it's my fault, right? I caused it. Now, the truth is, I compromise my morals, and I have no self-respect or dignity, and you owed it to me now in turn, in return for me compromising my basic dignity. You're supposed to behave. And I compromised my basic dignity, and you went off and you misbehaved. And the insanity of the codependent is, but I do it again. And I think, well, maybe if I'll compromise my morals and my principles again, maybe finally the addict will realize that they owe it to me to behave. So really, that people pleasing is so poisonous, because what is it? It's a perverse attempt to control others. And by the way, that's why it's so hard to hit rock bottom in codependence, much more than in addiction, because with addiction, eventually it's very hard to justify what you're doing. Codependence, you can justify it to the bitter end because it's noble. It's like it would be immoral for me not to bend over backwards to save this person who is dying right in front of me.
I'm a hero.
I'm a hero. That's right. I'm a hero. That's right. And there's all that, what do they call it? The sunk cost fallacy. That if I'm already down $10,000 at the blackjack table, I can't walk away until I sell my house. Right. So the people-pleasing behavior is really one of the favorite drinks of the codependent to get drunk on. Not for the sake of the people-pleasing, but what it gets me as a codependent, my people-pleasing gets me, at least for a second, that false promise of, now he's going to behave. Now things are going to be calm and normal because I just compromised my values and did what he wanted me to do, or pretended what he wanted me to pretend. So you could see why, for a codependent, that's really, really, really toxic. And, I have to learn how to say, no, I'm not going to pretend that by compromising my values, that somehow the people I love will be protected. There's no such promise. There's no contract to sign that says that. Okay. Let's go to the next step. So when I realized that the people-pleasing behavior is really, really perverse, one thing I might do is to say, I got to stop being a people pleaser. From now on, no more Mr. Nice Guy. No more Mr. Nice Guy. In fact, I'm going to be mean. I'm going to be tough as nails, rigid. And I've actually seen many people, say things like, I'm a recovering codependent and I'm allergic to people pleasing. That's my downfall. That's my weakness. So no, I have to be rigid and unyielding and unflexible because I'm a people pleaser. This is my recovery. My recovery is to no longer be a people pleaser. And I think that's the great misunderstanding. Your recovery from being a codependent is not to no longer do nice things for people or be flexible or be accepting or be tolerant. God forbid to say that someone in recovery for codependence has to become unyielding and judgmental and rigid and stern and strict. God forbid.
And the answer to everything is no.
And the answer to everything is no. That's right. I'll get back to you. Right. Maybe I'll say yes. Maybe. Talk to my sponsor. Maybe. But the reality is, it's not the people pleasing or being nice or being flexible that was toxic. It was using that as a drug. In other words, the codependent actually can never truly be kind, because whenever I'm being kind to you, there's a purpose, there's an agenda. There's always an ulterior motive. I have to be kind to you. It's not real kindness. It's not real kindness. And I'll tell you something else. It's not real giving. It's taking. Because when I'm a codependent, when I give to you, I'm not giving to you. It's not for fun and for free, to use Chuck C's lingo from A New Pair of Glasses. When I'm in active codependency and I'm a people pleasing and I give to you, you think that's for fun and for free? That comes with an invoice. And I'll bill you for it. It's an invisible invoice that comes in the mail that says, I was nice and sweet and kind to you, and I let you walk all over me. You owe me my sanity, which is absolute idolatry, because I'm trying to get something from you that I can only get from God. I'm trying to get my sanity and serenity from you. I can't get my sanity and serenity even from sober people. I can't get it from any people. Human beings cannot give me my sanity and serenity. I need to get it from God. So the codependent, what's the real problem, the real first drink, so to speak, that the codependent has to stay away from? It is the misappropriation of human kindness as a cynical attempt to manipulate others. As a codependent, I'm not addicted to kindness. I'm addicted to manipulation. But I call it kindness. Don't call it kindness. If it were kindness, you know what it would look like? If it were real kindness, it would have no expectations.
It would truly be free.
It would be free. And this is how I guide people. I tell them, you can make any concession. You can make any compromise, provided it's not manipulative. In other words, if I'm saying I'm going to do something I'm uncomfortable doing in the hopes that you will now owe me some behavior that will give me serenity and sanity. So first of all, like I said, that's idolatry, because you can't give me my sanity and serenity. But it's just so it's so cynical. It's being such a user. I'm using you. But I'm the martyr. I'm the codependent. I'm the martyr. I'm the hero. No, I have to be real with myself. I'm a user. I'm not really being kind. So really being kind and really being accepting and really being tolerant means that I do it to make you more comfortable. And I realize that even making you more comfortable may not mean you get sober tonight or this year or ever. And I'm not happy about that. I'm sad about that. But I don't think that I'm the one who can force you to do what you've got to do. So I think this is where the clarity comes in, from this supposed contradiction that you're posing, which I know a lot of people grapple with. It's not about, do I have boundaries or radical acceptance? That's not a helpful way to phrase it, because I think it's confusing. Say it like this. Am I ready to start being selfless in my interactions? Or do I still want to use my interactions as a totally futile attempt to get serenity from other human beings? So I say, any compromise that you're ready to make, any concession you're ready to make, without any expectation that will get you anything, that is totally sober behavior. Totally sober. And I don't think it's any contradiction whatsoever to the dignity that one finds in Al-Anon or any of the other 12-step programs that are for the friends and family of addicts. The main thing that I think people find in recovery is dignity. It's dignity. And that's with addicts as well as codependents, but I think in some ways even more so a codependent, because with the addict, it's almost like, well, the side effects of my using caused me humiliation. Like because of the stuff I was doing, the consequences, let's call it, the consequences of my using brought me into degrading experiences, caused me humiliation. And recovery restores my dignity. That's with an addict. But with a codependent, I think it's even more severe, because like it's almost like part and parcel of the addiction is what's the drink? It's trading my dignity for this false hope. So any concession or compromise, any allowance you can make and retain your dignity, not only is that okay, I think that that's marvelously spiritual.
So let me see if I got that. I'm not going to repeat 30 minutes of that, but I'm going to ask a punchline question. So as long as I recognize that my dignity comes from my own actions and my serenity comes from my relationship with God, how I treat the addict is almost immaterial. Do come to the Seder.
Yeah.
Don't come to the Seder. You're using, you're not using. That's a sideshow, which isn't relevant to the conversation. I'm proud of you because you're God's. You're God's kid who's hurting right now and is doing things that you shouldn't be doing. But that doesn't, my love for you, my pride about you is unchanged. And my interactions with you are just technical. Does it practically make chaos at my table if you're there? I may have to not allow you to be there, or maybe I could find it with myself to look at you like I would be kind to someone else and not make it personal. You are not going to make or break my mood or my day. I will, and my relationship with God will, and that's it.
That's right.
So lot to process. We need to. That's why it's good this is being recorded, so we can review this and study this in more in depth. All right, we're out of time, right? And we're out of time. This was supposed to be an hour.
Yeah, we're way over time.
I don't know who on your side is going to shoot me for keeping you long. Any parting shots besides www.fourcups.org? Go buy your Haggadah today.
Yeah. Parting shot is that thank you. Really, really thank you for getting me to do this. This was a dream for so many years. And people always say in acceptance speeches, they win an award. It would have never been possible without so and so. But like literally, Nechemia, it would not have happened. It would not have happened. And I'm deeply grateful to you. And I'm sure this Pesach, many hundreds, many thousands of people will also be grateful to you.
With God's help,
and Hashem should bless you with all revealed good. You shouldn't have to figure out how it's good. It should be readily apparent for you and your family.
And thank you for doing this journey. This was in a very odd way a lot of fun. There was an incredible learning experience, and it was a great
kind of fun.
All right, that's it. Thanks a million. And again, folks, fourcups.org. Go buy your Haggadah. Rabbi Taub, thanks a million. Do you want to look at the chat, or are we done? It's too late.
I've been glancing at it. It's beautiful stuff, but I think we got to have mercy on people.
All right. Adios, everyone. Sei gesund.
Yeah.
All right.